Welcome to the podcast. I'm Amanda.
I'm Laura.
I'm Kendra.
And today we are going to start a series of 2. I can't believe that we haven't specifically addressed these topics yet because it's such a common topic in coaching. But we are going to talk about a scarcity mindset in this episode. And then the following episode, we'll talk about an abundance mindset. So a scarcity mindset is like how living in not enough can reshape your mind, your choices, your life. In coaching, there's a big principle that your thoughts make you feel a certain way, and how you're feeling determines the actions that you take or don't take throughout the day. And then that over time creates your experience of life. So today, let's unpack the scarcity mindset, what it is, how it quietly changes the way that you think and behave, and then how small shifts can buy you back mental space. Have you ever noticed that when one thing goes wrong, like a late text, a tight bank account, a short night of sleep scarcity is a big one for me, everything feels worse. The noises are louder, people are meaner, everything's a lot more urgent. That's because scarcity is starting to crowd your mind. It's taking over things that you don't even realize that it's creeping into. So in this episode, we're going to define the scarcity mindset, how it looks when it shows up in your life. Sometimes it's really subtle. And then we'll explore the results of that. And then if you want to interrupt this thought process, how you might start to do that. So what is a scarcity mindset? It's a pattern of thinking where you feel you have less of a resource than you need. And that perception dominates attention, emotion, and choice. It's not just being poor in whatever. It's a psychological state that can happen around lots of different things, not just money. It can happen around time, sleep. It can happen around love, your status, literally anything that you could possibly value. You can have scarcity around that. And that's interesting to me to think about how scarcity it's not just money. It's so much more than that. Right. I don't think I've ever truly felt super scarcity mindset around money, but I have about a lot of other things. So that's kind of why we're going to talk about that.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, how it shows up when you are at work, or even just like, I know it's in the grocery, like just overhearing what people say, like once you become aware of the scarcity mindset, or even just like with my daughter at college, she was telling me about a situation. And I'm thinking in my brain, I didn't say this to her, but I'm like, oh gosh, that's a scarcity mindset.
Mhm.
Like once you get a hold of it, it becomes rather apparent in lots of situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
For me,
go
it's
ahead.
time. Like
Yes.
often it's time, like and energy. And it's amazing how if I can get myself to shift into, sometimes I feel like I'm gaslighting myself where I'm like, I have all the time I need. I could do twice as much as what I'm currently doing. But it really can help you see what you really do have and get your
Yeah.
brain out of that panic.
Well, we will clarify in the abundance one too. You can do toxic positivity. You can gaslight yourself. That's not what we are talking about. And also, we need to clarify there are truly people that don't have enough. That's not what
Yes.
we're
Oh,
talking about here. We're talking about, I don't have enough time. Well, what are the things that you need to do? It's an unexamined thought that we're talking about. Because I do the same thing. And what happens when you start freaking out about that you don't have enough time? At least for me, I start shutting down.
yes.
I get
Absolutely.
overwhelmed. And then guess what gets accomplished? Even less. That's the
It's
result
amazing.
of
Yeah.
that's the result of that thought for me. So that is one time. I don't have any more time than any other human on this planet. This is one that's easy to challenge because it's like there literally isn't more time that somebody else has than I do in a day.
Right.
It's the same amount of time. So what are they doing? I mean, probably they're delegating, probably they're very intentional about the things that get their attention. I mean, I don't know. So that's super clarifying. It's a thought unexamined that we're talking about. So 2 key psychological processes that happen in scarcity. One is tunneling, which is another word for attention capture. Scarcity pulls your mental focus towards the urgent shortfall. It puts you in the gap. You are looking at what you're lacking. And so you see the leak and not the whole roof. And that intense focus can help for the immediate problem, but it blinds you to all the other things that are going on in your life. Another process at work is bandwidth tax, or otherwise known as cognitive load. Worrying about your lack, worrying about scarcity consumes your working memory, consumes your mental energy, consumes your self-control. So the brain literally has less, which is funny since it's scarcity, has less mental bandwidth for planning, creativity, your impulse control, your options for how you want to react to something, or even your relationships. So that's why small shortages, at least in the way that you're thinking about it, can lead to big mistakes or short-sighted choices. Experimental and field studies have shown that there's measurable drops in cognitive performance when people are experiencing scarcity in whatever level. So some other things that are at work, we just like all of these kinds of things that didn't necessarily go along with our medical school learning. But other things that are going on in scarcity are, I like this, present bias, short-term thinking, which is another word for short-term thinking. I just think it's funny that there's a term for it. Short-term thinking is present bias. Sounds very scientific.
Yeah.
Scarcity makes future planning feel less reachable. Like if you are in the gap in this present moment, then you're not planning for your long-term success. You are stuck in this moment where you seemingly are in this gap. So you make instant decisions. You do a bunch of last minute fixes rather than planning, a little bit of intention for your future actually saves you a ton of time. And then lastly, there's stress amplification. This is actually, I was scrolling on something and it was like, scarcity gives you more stress. Abundance doesn't. I was like, well then I need less scarcity. How about that? So the psychological stress around your seeming lack intensifies your reactivity. It makes you more anxious, defensive, and or avoidant. And so scarcity isn't only external, it literally reshapes your attention and your thinking. So let's look at what that might look like in everyday life.
Yeah, we talked about a few examples at the beginning, but here are some more obvious places where scarcity shows up. We talked about money and time. So money scarcity, it can be the belief or reality. So either you think you don't have enough cash, savings, whatever at the moment, or there's a reality that, yes, I need to figure out this week, today, this week, this month. And so the behavior is like bargain hunting. So you're always looking for the bargain. Where can I save money? Almost to the point of impulse purchase when a deal appears. So this can occur in like everyday things like groceries and, accessories, all the things that you feel like you need. But then you avoid the bill or the funding conversation. Like just because it's a deal, yes, it lights up that part of your brain. But when you're already in a money scarcity, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to save money. But then, like, do you really need that? And then, you get overwhelmed and that creates that avoidance. So you don't talk about it, much less spend energy to plan for it or even talk about like the B word, a budget, right? The budget. And so, that word is termed loosely in my house. I'm all about a budget. My husband's like, ish. And so, there's some decision errors, obviously can strain a relationship, but also that chronic worry. And we talked about this if you've listened to any of our podcasts. Worry and anxiety takes up mental bandwidth. It takes up real estate and it lives rent free. So it is occurring in your brain and it's actually not serving you. It's not doing anything to help you move down the line. Time scarcity is another thing. So either it's usually feeling like there's not enough time, but if we bring back that B word, budgeting time, we usually can find time. But it's really just the rushing through conversations, skipping rest, buying, or let me say this way, borrowing time from other things to give to other things. So maybe a allocation of your time because you're stealing from Peter to pay Paul, basically. And so you're skimping on things that would probably actually help you in the long run to think more, to have more clarity and to be able to stay kind of on top of your game. And then also in that same frame, it's like also overcommitting. I mean, Laura, I love how she talks about overfunctioning all the time. This is a part of that. And so like making up for maybe where you don't feel enough, you overcommit or you're multitasking because you're trying to be all things to all people. So there's a lot of behaviors that actually malalign with probably the more, what's the word I'm looking for, like more appropriate ways in order to buy back some time. And then as a result, you have, 1/4 of your attention focusing on things, you're missing things, you're emotionally, physically, spiritually exhausted. And honestly, in the long term, giving, 1/4% here, 1/4%, 1/4%, whatever you want to say in the long term, just it's all around decreased productivity, but you're also not showing up how you intend or how you really want to.
Can I add something to money scarcity? Just another way I've seen this show up is that, when I was in college, I definitely had money scarcity because like I had to sell my plasma to get money for pizza. I definitely did not have money. And I have seen situations where people have gone from that, that like some level of poor at some point in their life to 7, 8 figure net worth. And there is still tremendous fear around money, a fear of losing instead of a sense of gratitude for where they've gotten. There's fear around
like hoarding,
losing, is hoarding, and like not able to really share freely, not able to take some risk to invest some of that. So there's several different ways that this can manifest. If we feel like it's just that sense of I don't have enough or what I have is going to be taken away. Honestly, you can actually see it in the public arena sometimes in the fear mindset that people have that, other people are going to take what they have. It's a sad way to live, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's probably like what A was saying, earlier about the short-term thinking. Like, oh, one time I didn't have this, I have it now, but there's not really the ability to step outside and look at the big picture and plan for the future and even create situations where you do stabilize that income or create a sense of security because you are investing or whatever. This is that real present minded, inability to make even good choices to plan for the future. So there's some other ways that may be a little less obvious where scarcity can show up. When we talk about social and emotional scarcity, so this is that feelings of loneliness, feelings that you're not supported. So you could be in a household with a significant other and kids, but you just feel alone. You feel unsupported. You don't feel like you have a close relationship, maybe with even the people in your own household or someone that you really could rely on. And so unfortunately, you people please because you're trying to secure any connection possible, or you just withdraw altogether to avoid rejection because maybe that's what you feel like. You've experienced it in your life. Your loneliness is out of your fear of rejection. So you withdraw, you don't even reach out. And then, sometimes you're just so exhausted, you hoard all of your emotional energy. You don't pour out because you're like, this is going to get sucked right out of my soul, right? So then we don't connect. We have shallow relationships. Maybe we even miss an opportunity for someone to come in that may be a meaningful relationship that actually can contribute to your life, help you out, and then you just are constantly ruminating or thinking, which once again, breeding anxiety and fear that, not only is there a misconnection or an inability to connect, but you're also thinking about, I don't have anything to give, right? Because you're already emotionally taxed, and that takes over in your mindset. And then you're like, what do I really have to give? Or every time I meet up with this friend, I feel like I'm just like, vomiting all over that person, all of my issues. But really, you fail to step back and see that there could be an opportunity here. Then there's status or esteem scarcity. So not feeling good enough, feeling loss of respect or identity, like the imposterism can really creep in here. I'm not really a doctor. I got here by luck. They threw my hat, they pulled me out of the lottery, and I got my chance. It is a sense that you have to overwork to prove worth. So this is that worth, productivity based worth. If someone tries to give you feedback, it's extreme defensiveness. It's not received well because once again, living in that scarcity, there's a fear of disconnect. And so you're real defensive because any connection could be at a risk or a cost. And then you're comparing. So this is really just imposterism at work. And so what is that? That's going to tax you. You're going to start feeling burnout. All of those behaviors are going to result in just an overwhelming feeling of burnout. You have a very brittle self-concept. It's really, really difficult to even take healthy risks, much less, I mean, really any risk. Definitely risk averse. And then there's choice and attention scarcity. So this is a constant information overload or having too many options, which paradoxically actually makes you feel poor in attention. And this has been studied a lot. Actually, I've read quite a few articles on this. I actually listened to a podcast on just the ability to make decisions. It's beyond decision fatigue. I mean, when you go to work every day, everybody's requesting that you have to make 1,000 million decisions every day. And that can be decision fatigue. But this is even more than this. This is just constantly being overloaded by decisions that you have to make. And you just basically could just shut down, stop making the decisions. And then their regret can come in, miss long-term planning, just all the different kinds of results. And then energy and health scarcity. So this is where we were taking, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul with your time scarcity. You're not getting sleep. You're not eating good nutrition. You're not moving your body. You're not recentering, meditating, praying. And so all of these can lower your impulse control. If you're not sleeping well, if you come home from a shift, I mean, I'm reaching for some guac, some chips, some queso. I'm not reaching for quinoa and grilled chicken, something to nourish my depleted stores. So these things are really put you in a place where preventative care goes out the window and you're nourishing to survive. And so this even further reinforces your physical and cognitive scarcity. And then, you're not recovering. You're not there. You're not taking care of yourself. Some
Yeah.
of the
Hey,
behavior. Oh,
guac.
yeah.
Guac is a health food.
It
Can we
is.
Okay.
It's a
just
good fat. Come on.
I tell myself yes, but when I eat the whole bag of chips,
It
maybe I should
depends
have
on
just.
why you're eating it. Yeah. If you're not hungry and it's just a
Oh, I'm
self-soothing
hungry.
behavior,
I have denied myself all day, and I'm like, oh, wow, come here, baby.
we're going to give you a pass on that one because it's a
Yeah.
healthy fat. It's good.
I know, right? I tell myself that too while I'm stuffing my face. So, some of the behavioral patterns that are common to these scarcities are hoarding or guarding. So, you absolutely cling to your resources. Like Laura said, you avoid sharing, you avoid delegating, you become a real control enthusiast, as A likes to say, a real control enthusiast with all of your resources, time, money, everything. You have tunnel driven short term fixes. So, you are patching the immediate problem while large risks grow. Like think about, I was born in the 1900s, there were water beds back then. So I always think about this, like you have the water bed and it springs a leak and you patch that one and then another leak and you patch. My bestie, she had a water bed. And so we were constantly getting the little, clear patches that you had to push down and do all the things. And I mean, she had like 20 of those by the end. And I'm like, we probably should just get a new tube, the inner portion. Nope, we just kept patching holes. So that reminds me of that. But comparison and scarcity signaling. So treating others as competitors for the limiting resources. So now it's one for one and all for one here at this point. You are just not cooperating. You're not sharing. You are hoarding everything for yourself. And then the emotional narrowing. So we talked about shame avoidance, hypervigilance, all of which further reduce your bandwidth because all of those breed fear, anxiety, worry, dread, doubt, all of that. So if you felt any of these, fast decisions, inability to cope, defensiveness, impulsive control, lack of impulse control, the short fixes, you're patching the waterbed and keeps springing a leak, you're probably in scarcity.
A couple of examples. This was a real life thing where a family member had just been like product of divorce. And so his brothers went to live with dad and he was living with mom. So he had some real scarcity around. He suddenly was a single child most days. And that totally makes sense. And we don't judge children because children don't have the capacity. But I watched an interaction where he was very protective and very almost like hoarding the other cousin that he was closest with and like basically propelling the other new cousins that he'd never met before. And I remember thinking like, oh, if he could just realize this is his opportunity for literally 25 new family members if he weren't driving them away. And then the other thing is like when you're really acting like that with, say, your bestie or your whatever, it almost drives them away too. When you're extra clingy No
Mm-hmm.
judgment, like it all makes sense. But you see how, like, if you're living in scarcity, you actually are blocking your opportunities. And then the other thing about time scarcity is like the danger in a to-do list is that when you're pressured and you're in the moment and I don't have enough time, is you pick the easy ones, not the important ones. And so
Mm-hmm.
that important thing that you really need to be making progress on keeps getting kicked to the curb when you don't feel that you have enough time for everything. So I love a checkbox. Maybe one of the most exciting things for me is to check a box. But that can get dangerous if you're not being intentional, because that's going to be the tendency if you have time scarcity.
So what are the results that we get from living with a scarcity mindset? And I'll say these can work for a while. And that's kind of the sneakiness of it. If you think about, so like people who grew up during the Great Depression, they learned a lot because they really went through intense scarcity and money trauma because they really didn't have enough. And so it worked for them then to save everything and to be extremely frugal. Like they had to. When it stops working, it can cause real problems. And the rigidity that we can get from going through traumatic experiences like that, or from living that way for a long time, can really impact the rest of our lives if we can't develop some flexibility around it. So if we're having scarcity immediately, we can have some cognitive costs. We have reduced working memory. That makes sense that scarcity really is a fear-based mindset, and fear doesn't reside in the best part of our brain. It's down in our limbic system. And so we're not using the best part of our brain. We'll have poorer planning. We're going to have more mistakes on complex tasks. It's not because of laziness, it's because the brain, again, is not using the prefrontal cortex. Studies show that people in scarcity perform worse on cognitive tests and are more present biased in choices, which makes sense. If you think about the part of the brain that's online there, the limbic system is very concerned with survival, and it doesn't think about the future. It thinks about now and how do I get safe. And so it makes sense that it really can't think ahead. Emotional and relational costs. These, I think, are the biggest. We can have chronic anxiety, irritability, avoidance in relationships, less empathy. Some research shows scarcity lowers empathic responses, which makes sense. Again, when we are afraid, we don't tend to have a lot of empathy. If we're concerned about our own survival, we don't connect as well with other people, and we can be more controlling. That's where a lot of control shows up if we are in a fear-based mindset and worried that we're not going to have enough. Over time, this erodes trust and connection. So if you have a lot of scarcity around money and you are married to someone who doesn't, you're probably sitting in a lot of anxiety about where's my money going, and maybe lose sight about, like, do you really not have enough money? Like, it's one thing if, you're living on $2,000 a month and your spouse is charging $5,000 on the credit card. That's one thing.
Ada.
If you, yeah, like that needs to be addressed. If you have plenty of money and more money all the time and you still have fear around it, that's worth taking a look at. That is going to be impacting your relationships, especially if the people that you love feel controlled by you. Behavioral and life course consequences. Again, when we're operating out of fear, we're not thinking about the future. We're not in the part of our brain that does that. And we have short-sighted financial or health choices. Like, there's some extreme stories about people who have such scarcity around money. They have enough, but they won't fix their roof, and their whole house can get ruined because they refuse to fix the roof, or they may hoard things. And we know what, if you've seen Hoarders, occasionally I'll watch that show and be like, there's nothing like that show to make you want to purge some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the same thing, is this fear-based mindset, and what is the result that we get from it. Or we might have some short-sighted health choices. Like in extreme situations, people will not go to the doctor or pay for medication to save money now, but ultimately that leads to bigger, more expensive problems down the road. They might miss opportunities. And then there's these reinforcement loops where solving the short-term problem worsens the long-term situation. And this scarcity can become self-perpetuating because when we think we don't have enough, we often can create that through the things that we do. It's important to note that real objective scarcity, like not enough shelter, that's different. That's, if you're in that situation, and I have been in that situation, that's real. And it's not just a mindset. If you really only have $5 in your checking account, that's objective evidence.
Data.
However, if you have $5 million in your bank account and you're still ordering the kids' meal when you go to a restaurant, you might have a scarcity mindset. The research shows that both real shortages and the subjective experience of scarcity matter, and both deserve compassion and practical solutions. So we don't want anyone here to feel judged around their scarcity. That's the last thing we want. We just invite you to be curious about why. Like, why is my brain doing this? And do I really feel good when, yes, I might feel good if I got a really great deal buying those tin cans of expired tuna for like 2 cents each in the moment. And then, but what is happening in my life? Am I really experiencing life the way I want to? There's an old story that I love to think about sometimes. It's these couples saved up all this money for a cruise, and they go on the cruise and they're excited to be able to travel around. And to save money on the cruise, they brought all of their own food. And so they just ate like soup out of a can the whole trip. And on the last day, they realized that the food was all included on the cruise, and they just didn't know. And that's what a scarcity mindset does, is it closes our minds and our eyes to things that the world is offering us. And it really can just affect the outcome of our lives and make us miss out on so much. And so let's not be those cruise people.
Is that a real story? Because that makes me very sad for them if they missed out on the decorative watermelon little fruit animals.
I believe
I'm gonna have to pretend like it's a metaphor. Oh, bless her.
It probably would have been early in the days of cruising, before people really knew. But so what
a lesson in asking better questions?
Yeah.
That's my first question when I board the ship. Can I have something to eat?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but probably everybody's done it before where you overpack. Like you can get a toothbrush if you forgot to, you know what I mean? Like it's going to be okay. These places, unless you're going to, a remote desert. I bet you there's a CVS.
Yeah, there's something.
If you really need it.
Yeah. You probably don't need the 12 days worth of clothing that I often pack for a 3-day trip.
Yeah.
I'm working on it.
Me too.
So what are some practical moves that we can do to loosen scarcity's grip? These are some simple practices that we can try this week. So first, we can name the scarcity out loud. So when we notice, and sometimes we can notice it in our bodies first, like the feeling of anxiety or a tightness in the chest, what am I feeling scarce about? And right now, we could say, right now I'm feeling short on time or sleep or money or support. And when we can verbalize that, actually helps get us more up into our prefrontal cortex and less in our limbic system. And when we can do that, it shifts us from that automatic tunnel to noticing. Naming reduces rumination and opens space for choice. This is a really, really important skill to develop to be able to tame that limbic system that loves to try to run our lives. Number 2 is buy small bits of, quote, slack. And what we mean by that is create some micro buffers, like a 10-minute standing pause between meetings, or, if you can build that into your clinic day, a $10 emergency little cash stash that you can keep, maybe tuck that in your glove box, or $100, like $100 in your glove box gives you a little feeling of, oh, I've got enough. I've got some backup there. Or
that takes me back to my childhood. My mom And Dad would, once again, retro 1900s. It was like, do you have a quarter in case you get stuck somewhere and you need
Need to call on the payphone.
So I was like, do you at least have some quarters? It wasn't like, do you have enough money to because you're going to go to Bueno and get yourself some party burritos and party tacos? No, it was, do you have some quarters? Because if you get stuck somewhere. So now my kids have always had their emergency money. It's like a 20 that they keep in the back of their phone. They're like, Mom, places don't even take cash. Why do you keep making me carry a 20 spot? I'm like, just do it.
Yes. Well, maybe it's a prepaid Visa gift card. I don't know. Something.
I know, right?
But it does give you a little bit of, okay, I've got that. Or maybe a nightly 15-minute wind down that's non-negotiable. We like to talk about taking our old lady baths at night. Like, just go take a nice little bath, relax. Maybe you're drinking a cup of herb tea. Maybe you're reading, doing a couple of yoga poses, something that you're going to be doing that is a non-negotiable. When you have these little buffers, it protects the bandwidth that you have so you don't constantly live in triage or in kind of a panic mode. Externalize memory and rules. So this is very important. We have a lot of thoughts, some of us do, all the time, and it takes up some of our working memory to try to remember things. So externalize those things, write it down. Keep a little notebook by your bedside so you can just write it down when something is trying to bother you, trying to keep you awake. Use checklists, simple rituals, or a one-line plan tool. When bandwidth is low, rely on external structures so you don't have to hold everything in your head. This helps us prevent errors and reroutes our energy to higher value thinking. Again, scarcity is a fear-based mindset. It is based in our limbic system. It is not based in the best part of our brain. And if we can do these little strategies, they're going to be helpful scaffolds to help us kind of move out of that fear-based mindset and into a more future-based, calm, peaceful, and joyful way of thinking. And it really does help just kind of understand why we think these things and how it makes sense that our brain does it, and we can choose something different.
I'll tell you that number 3, the checklist, the simple rituals.
Yeah.
Where are my menopause moms at? Menopause is not for the weak.
Okay,
But this was
so you brought that up. Do you know who on Instagram, this lady named Melanie, she has started something called the We Do Not Care Club.
Oh,
I love
Have
her.
you seen her? Oh my
I
God. And
love her.
her checklist, like,
Yes.
yes.
She is representing this number 3.
I mean,
external rules.
Yeah. And time
Yes.
scarcity, get
Yes.
yourself a We Do Not Care Club marker and just start scratching stuff out.
It is. These tips,
I mean,
those tips for success
Yeah.
right here, y'all. These are
At
tips
first-
for success.
That's the first thing you always have to do is declutter. Like, you could
Yes.
clean 150,000 things in the hoarder house, but it'd be a
Yes.
lot more helpful getting rid of the hoarding.
Yes.
Get rid of your to-do, get rid of your stuff
Yes.
on your list. We do
Yes,
not care.
I know. She has definitely mastered it. I love her.
Yes.
So just to recap, scarcity changes attention and choice. It's predictable and fixable in small human ways. So hopefully we've been able to add a few to your list today. On your drive home, why don't you just think about this? Pick one scarcity you noticed in your week, whether it be time, money, attention, connection, or something that maybe is a little more subtle, and name one tiny buffer you can put in place. So next week, we're going to come on to the flip side of this and talk about abundance and that mindset and the practices that aren't fake optimism. They're actually evidence-based ways to widen your bandwidth. And that's it for today. So if you found this conversation helpful, the best way to support us is by leaving a review. It helps other physicians find our podcast. It moves us up on the list. And we'd also love to hear from you, what you don't care about anymore, what you're decluttering. We'd love to hear it. So email us at podcast@thewholephysician.com. And don't forget to follow us on the socials, Instagram, Facebook, at The Whole Physician. We love connecting with you there. Before we go, there's a couple of invitations. Our next free masterclass is coming up soon. And if you want, join our weekly newsletter for bits of encouragement straight to your inbox, plus all the details on the next upcoming masterclass. Click the link in the show notes to sign up. Thanks for spending time with us today. Until next time, you are whole, you are a gift to medicine, and the work you do matters.